And our next guest had been spending a bit of time yesterday on Twitter. It had to do with the vacancy rates, the office rates in Halifax, as the report from Turner Drake and Partners said staggering. Office vacancy rates in Halifax are staggering, comparing us to Calgary. And some are saying it's a bad thing. Some are saying it's a good thing. And some people are not sure what to think with all this arguing about vacancy rates. But our first guest to kick off the program this afternoon, someone who's been on our show before, we say good day and good afternoon to Sam Austin, urban planner. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Sheldon. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Looking forward to this conversation. And when I went to your website, I know you ran municipally. Are you intending on running municipally in District 5 in Dartmouth in the next election this October?
Oh, I might. Haven't firmly decided one way or the other there.
Okay, didn't mean to push you.
Options.
Well, no. When I went to your website and it said your candidates page, so that that's one of the websites that you have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when you're ready to talk about that, we'll certainly.
I will give you a call back then.
No worries. No worries. Gloria's not reoffering, I hear. So.
Yeah, I gather as much.
Yeah. This office space issue, you work as a planner. This is something that you pay attention to. So who's right? Is this a bad thing or is this a good thing?
Well, I mean, like anything to do with development, the answer is complicated. I think what's significant here when Turner compares us to Calgary is Calgary is, of course, in the midst of big economic turmoil coming from the crash in oil prices. We don't have a crisis at all to explain our vacancy rate. And what's been happening in our downtown is buildings empty out, they're moving to the new buildings, and so that's where all this vacant space is coming from. And that's not a bad thing, because then you're getting new space into your market, right? Because the building that was attractive in the 1970s is maybe not where the bank or the law office, or they don't want to be in there necessarily anymore. It's not that kind of prestige address. So they're moving along, but the issue that I think we have is that there's shifting of seats, but there's no growing of the downtown demand, not in any kind of significant way, which is where that vacancy rate that Turner looks at and calls staggering is coming from.
Well, and I spoke with Paul McKinnon last night, and he did make that same analogy. That it's kind of like shifting spaces, and I said, well, is it less like the Titanic, more like Carpathia? We're shifting these businesses are moving to newer space, so that opens up perhaps some more affordable office space for anyone who chooses to move into the downtown, if they so choose.
Yeah. And you can see, like, we actually lost one of those buildings that was great for that downtown, where you actually ended up with kind of smaller offices that wouldn't necessarily be able to be in a downtown environment, was the Roy building on Barrington, right? That it served that kind of function. I mean, that might be the future for some of our buildings, some of the older ones downtown. But if you look at, like, 22 Commerce Court, the old Royal Bank, the project that's there, you had a fairly prestigious office building once upon a time. The future for it is more residential, right? The demand for downtown seems pretty flat, at least on the office side.
We're talking this afternoon. Sam Austin, he's an urban planner. He's a blogger. SpacingAtlantic.com is one of his websites. That move to space and retail, and we had this discussion about zoning. That came up as part of this, saying that to have a business operate out of Burnside, well, if it's not fitting within that, what you would consider the what the business park was built for, which was light industrial, then it probably wasn't appropriate for council to grant that. Apparently, they've reconsidered, and it won't happen on a go-forward basis. So, is this a sign of the economy stalled? We see the number of buildings going up, and there is a lag. They tell us, you can't decide tomorrow that you want to have office space. You need to make plans a couple of years ahead.
Yeah. Well, some of it, of course, there was a brief little window there where things had gotten kind of tight downtown, and after 15, 20 years, you were finally at the point where it could justify new construction, which is where Waterside Center down there kind of came from, and the TD reno. But the long-term trend has been, like, over the last 15, 20 years, where people had been saying, well, we haven't had anything built downtown. We actually had lots of office space being built, just none of it was downtown. It was all out in Burnside, Bears Lake, Bedford, these kinds of places. And you have to ask, well, why was that the case? Why wasn't any of this really coming to the downtown market? And it comes to several things, being that your tax burden is lower out on the edge. The rents are lower, which makes it easier for tenants. There's free in quotations, because planners know there's no such thing, free parking out there. You're near employees, because that's where people have moved. More and more people live out on the edges now too. And that is also fundamentally, it was, prior to HRM by design, significantly easier to get your building approved to go out there in the first place, right? Downtown development can be quite contentious, whereas out in the burbs you could apply and there's pretty low risk that your project was going to run into any kind of difficulties on that kind of political side of things. So you put that all together and it's kind of no wonder, right?
So, Sam, this idea that Halifax is falling victim, or Halifax municipality is falling victim to this urban sprawl. Where do you fall in on that argument? Do you think it's we've pushed out too far and it's time to start moving humans, to live and work downtown?
I think it's all about balance and offering people choice. And what we've been offering people prior, we're starting to make some changes there. What we've been offering people in the past has been a very skewed choice. The downtown, and the deck was stacked against it. So I don't think it's a matter of just saying, well, we are not going to do any new development elsewhere in the municipality and everyone must live in a tower downtown. That's not a recipe for success either. But we need to offer a fair competition between downtown and the burbs. Because if you take downtown Dartmouth, right, Kings Wharf down there, which has been a beautiful boon to downtown Dartmouth, they actually are supposed to have an office component there, and part of what they've applied for in their amended agreement is additional flexibility, because they're finding it tough to get that office part off the ground, right? Because it's hard to compete with Burnside and Bears Lake right now.
Where does Sam Austin fall in this argument over the convention center? Was this something that you thought would be good or not for the region?
Oh, that's quite a tricky one. Battles from the past. I think, to some extent, the convention center, it became a Band-Aid for the bigger problem, right? Everyone kind of looking and fearing for what's happened to the downtown, and then latching on to the convention center as a solution, as the big project. If you kind of look down the hill, you had, I forget the fellow, I think it's the Teal Group there that owned the TD. I mean, they were putting many millions into renovating that building, all private money. The convention center, we'll see what it does. I'm not so convinced that it was either the worst thing that was going to happen to downtown, or that it's going to be the magic solution that's going to fix everything. Ultimately, I think the truth's going to be somewhere in the middle. But a convention center without the fundamentals being rightened it's not going to do it, because the reason that project became very viable is because of the government money that goes into it.
Well, there was that, and the Teal Group did launch a lawsuit. It wasn't successful, and I think they're still deciding on appeal. But foregone conclusion. Yeah, not sure. That was part of their argument, was that the playing field was unlevel because there was city and provincial money put into the convention center, whereas they were trying to do it on their own.
Yeah, in that case, it was an argument within downtown, though, as opposed to looking outward. Two of the things that I think the city that would make a big difference for downtown, not just on the other side, would be if we can get more people downtown, which we've seen some encouraging developments in that regard over the last number of years, both here and across the country. Because if you kind of think of us, I kind of think of our downtown in a little bit kind of where Toronto was in the 1990s, and there was no demand for office downtown Toronto back then either. All the growth and development was kind of out Mississauga, out along the 401, and their downtown was languishing, but it was still an attractive place to live, so they built a lot of condos downtown, and that's almost what we have here. Our downtown is a very attractive place to live and to play, as they say. if you have more people downtown, business wants to be next to their employees. They want to be next to customers. If you have a more vibrant downtown in terms of a residential population, that would be helpful. The other missing ingredient that I see is on the public transit side. We invest a lot in public transit, but there's still results could be better, especially on how competitive it is. If you look across the country, generally the downtowns that are doing the best are the ones that have a very good transit connection, right? Calgary being the city of sprawl, the sprawl that it is, the light rail system there is absolutely amazing, and it sustains that downtown in a way that our scale is less that we should look at.
Right. So if we're going to compare Calgary and Halifax, we didn't have the boom, so...
Yeah, we didn't have a boom, but
yeah.
Whether you have a boom or a bust, I mean, you don't necessarily have a whole lot of control over that. I mean, the oil prices are oil prices, but what you do have control of is what you establish as your playing field and what services you put in place. And in the past, it's taken us 50 years to kind of get to where we are now, where less than 50% of our office space is downtown, putting us almost in a category of one. We should really have a serious conversation about that, because if downtown doesn't do well, it impacts so much of the rest of the city.
All right. Sam, do you consider yourself from Dartmouth?
I do.
Okay, just checking.
Well, if you press me here, I'm an Eastern Shore boy.
Okay. Well, you moved into town. You just moved into the closest.
I'm an urbanite at heart.
You moved into the closest town. It's all good.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate this as always. We'll be talking soon.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
All right.
Have a good afternoon.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Sam Austin, urban planner, a blogger behind Spacing Atlantic, and there are nuances to this story for sure.